You won't believe what I discovered after pouring my entire savings into my brother's wedding. I thought I was helping my family, until one quiet moment revealed everything they'd been hiding from me. What happened next? It changed everything. My trust, my future, and the way I saw myself. If you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you, yeah, you're gonna want to hear this. I remember staring at my phone, blinking hard, thinking I must have opened the wrong app. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just the exhaustion from a 16-hour wedding setup or the champagne I never got to sip. It was the $8,400 that had mysteriously vanished from my account overnight. I froze. That was my condo fund. The money I had scraped together over years of skipping brunches, turning down vacations, and living like every cent mattered, because it did. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I refreshed the screen again. Same result. $8,400. Gone. It hit me like ice water down the spine. This wasn't a simple overdraft or some accidental transaction. This was intentional. And worse, it was personal. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a glitch, something reversible with a polite call to the bank. But deep down, I already knew. I knew who had done it. The same people who'd smiled through a million favors, the ones who'd clinked glasses to a perfect wedding just hours before. Family. That was the betrayal that burned the most. And when I stood there with my voice shaking, looking for some kind of explanation, my mother laughed, not nervously, not out of confusion. A smug, dismissive chuckle like I was some child whining over spilled juice. "You can't do anything about it," she said. Just like that. As if I wasn't a grown woman with rights, with dignity, with limits. I wish I could say I screamed, that I flipped the table or stormed out dramatically. But I didn't. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and placed it calmly on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry about what happens next," I said, voice steady. But inside, something had snapped. This time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not for them. Not anymore. If you've ever been in a moment where you had to swallow the hurt and stand tall anyway, yeah, I've been there too. If stories like this make you feel seen or understood, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's more where this came from, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. My name's Meline Carter. I'm 31, live in Boston, and I work as an events coordinator. Sounds glamorous, right? It's not. It's late nights, emotional clients, last-minute vendor crises, and walking 10 miles in flats while pretending you're not dying inside. But I love it. I built this career from the ground up, without favors, without shortcuts. Every client, every contract, I earned it. But being the daughter of the Carter family, that success never counted for much. My parents, Diane and Charles Carter, run a big real estate firm downtown, Carter & Co. My younger brother Ryan was always the golden boy, groomed from birth to carry the legacy. Me? I was the +1 to their dinner parties, expected to marry rich, stay quiet, and coordinate canapes, not careers. Growing up in our pristine colonial house in Brookline felt like living in a museum. Every room styled to perfection, every conversation calculated. Even my bedroom looked like a showroom. White lace curtains, porcelain dolls I never asked for, and zero traces of me. I'd walk in and feel like a guest in my own life. Nothing was ever really mine, not even my future. I went to Boston University on scholarship, studied business, graduated with honors, thought maybe that would change how they saw me. Spoiler alert, it didn't. When I told them I was leaving the family business to start my own events company, my dad called it a cute detour. My mom didn't even look up from her wine. "You'll come back when it fails," she said. That was the vote of confidence. But I didn't come back. I worked. Hard. I lived in a tiny studio in Cambridge, ate ramen way past college, and built a name for myself. I found joy in making people feel seen and celebrated, because I knew what it felt like to be invisible. And for a while, I believed that if I just proved myself enough, they'd finally see me too. I couldn't have been more wrong. When Ryan got engaged to Ivy, this picture-perfect girl from New York whose family practically owns the Upper East Side, I knew the wedding was going to be huge, but I didn't expect to be the one paying for it. Not directly, anyway. It started innocently enough. "Mel, since you work with weddings, could you help us find a florist?" "Sure. Of course. Anything for family, right?" But one favor led to another, then another. Suddenly, I was booking venues, coordinating catering tastings, managing RSVPs, building schedules, chasing vendors, solving drama, all pro bono. And when I raised questions about budgets or limits, I got hit with that classic mom line. "It's your brother's only wedding, Meline. Don't be selfish." Like love had a price tag, and I was the bad guy for asking who was paying. Still, I wanted to believe this time would be different. That maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see my value. Not just for what I could do, but for who I am. So I kept saying yes, kept showing up, kept draining the savings I'd worked years to build. 500 here, 1,000 there, welcome baskets, upgraded linens, premium bar packages. I was bleeding financially, but emotionally, I was already in pieces. Every time I tried to pull back, there was another fire to put out, another guilt trip. You're so good at this, Mel. You're the only one we can count on. I started skipping meals, canceling clients, losing sleep. My apartment turned into a storage unit full of vases and floral samples. I told myself I was investing in family, that maybe this time they'd finally say thank you, but they didn't. Not once, not even close. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about love or celebration. This was about control. About using me because they knew I'd say yes, because I always did. Until now. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with that kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. I wasn't hungover. I hadn't even had time to drink, but something felt off. I rolled over, checked my phone, and felt my stomach twist into a knot. My account balance looked wrong. I blinked, refreshed the app. Still wrong. I clicked into my transactions, and there it was. A transfer of $8,400 made the night before. My heart dropped. I knew that number. It matched the final invoice I'd covered for the honeymoon upgrades. Upgrades I hadn't agreed to pay for. I stared at the screen, numb. It said the transfer was made through my mobile app, but I hadn't even touched my phone during that time. I was running around the venue like a maniac, solving last-minute problems. My clutch had been left on a table all night. Anyone could have grabbed it. I called the bank, still trying to believe it was a mistake, but the representative confirmed it had been done from my device, using my login. Maybe you shared your PIN with someone, she asked gently. I hadn't. Not exactly. But my PIN was Ryan's birthday, a fact my mother definitely knew. That realization made my throat go dry. Not only had someone accessed my account, they knew exactly how. This wasn't a hacker. This wasn't random. This was someone close. Someone I trusted. And as awful as it felt to admit, I already knew who. I confronted my mother first, my hands shaking as I held up my phone. Did you transfer this? I asked, voice low but urgent. She glanced at the screen and actually smiled. Then she sipped her coffee like we were discussing the weather. It was needed. You'll survive, she said. I felt like I'd been slapped. No apology. No guilt. Just calm entitlement, like I owed them this money for being born into the Carter family. I looked at Ryan, hoping for some kind of ally, but he avoided my eyes, suddenly too busy stirring his coffee to answer. You can't just take my money, I said, the volume of my voice rising slightly. It was just sitting there, she replied, brushing me off. You weren't doing anything with it. This way, it helped your brother. That was their logic. If it benefits Ryan, it doesn't count as stealing. The room was quiet, heavy with discomfort. My father eventually said, let's not make this dramatic, Meline. Like I was the problem. Not the theft, not the betrayal. Me, for daring to be upset about something they had done behind my back. I felt myself being gaslit in real time. And that's when I knew none of them were going to fix this. Not on their own. Not unless they were forced to. My family wasn't just ignoring boundaries. They didn't believe I had any. And for the first time in my life, I realized I would have to teach them otherwise. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, envelope in hand. Inside it, every screenshot, every invoice, every transfer. Proof, not just of what they took, but of what I gave. I stared at the manila paper like it was a shield. And in a way, it was. I had called Sophia, an old college friend turned family lawyer, told her everything. She didn't flinch, didn't question, just listened and said, this isn't just unethical. It's criminal. For once, I felt like someone was on my side. Not out of obligation, out of principle. We drafted a formal letter, outlined the facts, prepared a police report, just in case. It felt surreal, like I was building a case against strangers, not the people who raised me. But the more I put it together, the more clarity I gained. This wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. I thought back to every moment I'd been dismissed, diminished, taken for granted. This time, I wasn't going to cry quietly in a bathroom. I wasn't going to eat the loss and swallow the shame. I was going to speak. Loudly, clearly, without apology. And as I slid the envelope into my bag, I looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same tired eyes. But something had changed. I wasn't walking into another brunch to play the role of the good daughter. I was walking into battle, and for the first time, I wasn't scared. In the Carter house, the unspoken rules were louder than any dinner table conversation. Ryan was the heir, groomed from birth, praised for mediocrity, and given every opportunity without question. I was the support act. My job was to clap politely and never steal the spotlight, and I played it well. From the outside, we looked like the perfect upper-middle-class family. Holiday cards with coordinated outfits, Sunday brunches with polite laughter. But behind closed doors, there was a quiet rigidity, a set of expectations that shaped everything, from how we dressed to how we spoke, and who we were allowed to be. If Ryan forgot a school assignment, it was shrugged off with, "He's just got so much potential." When I got a 98 on a test, my mom asked why it wasn't 100. There was no room for nuance. Ryan's mistakes were growth moments. Mine were failures. That imbalance seeped into every corner of my life. I stopped expecting fairness around age 12. By then, I'd learned that being the responsible one meant I got more responsibility, not more appreciation. Ryan got new cars, summer internships handed to him, and constant praise. I got told I was too emotional when I asked for help. But the real kicker, I started believing it was normal, that my job in the family was to make sure everyone else was okay, even if I wasn't. It's funny how we internalize that stuff so young, and how long it takes to realize it was never our job in the first place. My parents never sat me down and said, "Here's your role." But they didn't have to. Their expectations were written into every raised eyebrow, every dismissive comment, every moment of silence when I needed support. It was like I was cast in a play I hadn't auditioned for. They wanted a daughter who would marry someone appropriate, host tasteful dinner parties, and keep quiet about her ambitions. Someone who knew how to decorate a table but never speak up at one. My dreams didn't fit that mold, and instead of curiosity, they responded with condescension. When I landed a client on my own, someone big, someone local, my mom called it cute, like I'd won a raffle, not secured a real deal. And when I tried to talk about my long-term business plans, my dad told me not to get ahead of myself. "Let's not pretend this is a real company," he said. Those comments cut deeper than they probably realized. Or maybe they did realize. Either way, I got the message. You're only valuable if you play your part. And if your part doesn't serve their story, then you're just background noise. It was always clear who the star was. So I smiled at the right times, stayed quiet at the wrong times, and slowly started to disappear in plain sight. I didn't stop dreaming. I just stopped expecting them to care. And somehow that hurt even more than the criticism, the indifference, the silence. After college, I had two options: join Carter & Co. or be labeled difficult. I chose difficult. I lasted 3 years at the firm. 3 exhausting, demoralizing years of being undermined, ignored, and used as a PR pawn. I was the female face of the company, just not a respected one. My ideas were sidelined. My work was questioned. At meetings, I'd pitch strategies only to have my father rephrase them minutes later. And suddenly, they were brilliant. I watched Ryan get praised for showing up on time while I worked weekends just to meet impossible expectations. The day I quit was both terrifying and exhilarating. I remember standing in the elevator, clutching the resignation letter in my bag, sweating through my blouse. But the moment I handed it over, something inside me shifted. For once, I wasn't waiting for permission. I just left. Starting over was brutal. I rented a tiny apartment with peeling paint and paper-thin walls. I juggled part-time gigs, begged for referrals, and taught myself everything I didn't learn in school. But I was free. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit someone else's narrative. And little by little, I built something real. I made mistakes, learned fast, and found clients who believed in me. Not because I had the Carter name, because I earned it. My business grew because I grew. But none of that seemed to matter to my family. Not until they needed something from me. Ryan was never just my brother. He was the chosen one. From the moment he could walk, he was being prepped for success. My parents praised him for the bare minimum, like tying his shoes or remembering to say thank you. Meanwhile, I was doing science fairs and winning essay contests. He flunked a math class once, and my dad blamed the teacher. I got a B+ in calculus and was told I needed to focus harder. That imbalance created a kind of invisible wall between us. I loved him, sure, but I also resented the way he could do no wrong. Who wouldn't? Every family trip, every dinner, every photo album centered around his milestones. His first car, his prom, his internship at the firm, all celebrated like national holidays. And me? I was the one taking the pictures, cleaning up, handling logistics, always behind the scenes. What stung the most wasn't just the favoritism. It was how blind they were to it. Like it was normal to worship one child and ignore the other. When I tried to bring it up once, my mom told me I was being sensitive. Translation: sit down, shut up, and stay in your lane. So I stopped trying to compete. I stopped bringing home wins and expecting applause. Instead, I focused on surviving the family dynamic. Quiet success. Quiet struggles. I stopped asking for recognition because it hurt less than being denied it again and again. There was always a script I was expected to follow. Be polite. Be supportive. Be available, especially when Ryan needed something. I was the safety net, the emotional sponge, the one who made holidays run smoothly. And I did it. For years. Because that's what daughters were supposed to do. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't living my life. I was playing a role written by my mother, directed by my father, and funded by my silence. My dreams were labeled impractical. My independence was called rebellion. Anytime I pushed back, I was overreacting. I tried fitting into their mold. I dated who they wanted. I wore what they suggested. I even considered going back to the firm once, just to make peace. But every compromise chipped away at something inside me, something that used to feel like self-respect. They wanted the version of me that kept the peace, looked pretty, and never challenged their authority. Anything else made them uncomfortable. They used words like family unity to control me, respect to silence me, and tradition to guilt me. It was all just another kind of performance. The truth is, I was never the difficult one. I was just the one who noticed the double standards, the one who saw behind the polished facade and dared to question it. And the more I tried to be accepted, the more invisible I became. That was their comfort zone. Me, invisible. You don't realize you're unraveling at first. It starts small. You stop speaking up at dinners. You hesitate before sharing good news. You second-guess every emotion because you've been told too many times that it's too much. And eventually, you just go quiet. I became a master at hiding what I felt, smiling through discomfort, shrinking my ambitions to fit their approval. I celebrated their wins and buried my own. I thought that was love. I thought that was what being a good daughter looked like. But it was just survival mode. By the time the wedding came around, I was already depleted. Not just financially, but emotionally. Years of being sidelined had left me tired in a way that no vacation could fix. I had no more energy to prove myself. I just wanted peace. But even that was too much to ask. Every request for help felt like another withdrawal from an empty account. And when I finally snapped, when I said no, they looked at me like I'd grown two heads. That's the thing about boundaries in a dysfunctional family. The first time you set one, you become the villain. But that erosion had a purpose. It showed me how far I had strayed from myself, how much I had allowed for the sake of harmony. And eventually, it pushed me to the edge, to the decision that changed everything. I stopped asking them to see me. I started seeing myself instead. It started with one simple line at dinner. Mel, maybe you could help with some of the wedding planning. It was my mom, smiling over a glass of red wine, using the same tone she'd once used to ask if I'd host Thanksgiving solo. Everyone else nodded like it was already decided. I didn't push back. How could I? I was an event coordinator. This was technically my field, but I didn't miss the way Ryan stayed quiet, letting the conversation happen around him. Ivy looked at me like I was staff, not a sister. I smiled and said, sure, even though my gut said no. By the end of that dinner, some help had turned into a list. Venues to scout, florists to vet, invitation styles to design. It wasn't collaborative, it was expected. No discussion about time, no talk of budget. Just an assumption. Meline will handle it. At first, I rationalized it. This is what family does, right? We pitch in. We make things easier. But deep down, it felt different. It didn't feel like support. It felt like strategy. Like I was the most convenient resource they didn't have to pay for. That was the seed. The moment the power dynamic shifted from unspoken to fully operational, I wasn't just the responsible sibling anymore. I was now logistics, funding, and backup plan. And no one even asked if I had the bandwidth for it, because they already assumed I'd never say no. Every week brought a new request, only they didn't call them requests. They called them favors, opportunities, chances to shine. I was praised for my taste, my efficiency, my eye for detail, as long as I kept saying yes. The second I hesitated, the compliments dried up. My mom started texting me Pinterest boards at 1 a.m. with captions like, "This would be perfect for the reception." Ivy emailed mock-ups as if I was her personal assistant. Ryan? Still MIA. He showed up for cake tastings but left the heavy lifting to me and pretended not to notice. Whenever I tried to bring up the costs, I was met with passive guilt. It's just one day, Meline. Don't you want your brother to have a perfect memory? The irony was painful. No one cared if I had perfect memories. I was just the one expected to create them. And every time I told myself to draw a line, something else pulled me back in. A sad look from my mom. An urgent email from Ivy. A task only I could do right. And like clockwork, I'd cave. Tell myself I'd say no next time. There was always a next time. They dressed it up as trust, as inclusion. But let's be honest, it was exploitation. Wrapped in family ties and topped with a bow of guilt. And I was too conditioned to call it what it was. Because in the Carter family, being useful was the only way to be loved. When we first talked numbers, the wedding was supposed to be elegant but reasonable. My mom threw around a figure of $40,000 and said it was plenty. Ivy wanted the Langham Hotel, which I knew was a red flag. That venue alone could swallow half the budget, and she wanted upgrades. Still, I tried to believe them. I created spreadsheets, contacted vendors I trusted, built timelines down to the minute. I kept everything tight, polished, and honest. But every week, something changed. Suddenly, elegant meant imported orchids. Reasonable meant monogrammed velvet menus and a 10-piece jazz band. I raised concerns. I highlighted numbers. I even proposed alternatives. But they acted like I was being stingy. My mom once rolled her eyes and said, "Don't nickel and dime your own brother's wedding." Ivy chimed in with, "It's not like we're asking you to pay for the whole thing." But that's exactly what was happening. Piece by piece, swipe by swipe. Vendor deposits were just for now. Floral upgrades were small splurges. My mom promised they'd reimburse me later. Those promises? Never written, never fulfilled, always floating just out of reach like a carrot on a string. And I let it happen. Because by then, I'd convinced myself I had to. I thought if I held it all together, they'd finally see me, that my value would be undeniable. But all they saw was someone easy to use, and I was too tired to prove otherwise. I started losing sleep. Not just from the workload, but from the mental gymnastics I was doing every night to justify why I was still helping. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, calculating costs in my head. Florals, linens, transportation. It all added up and chipped away at me. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, "Just hold on till the honeymoon. Then it's over." But deep down, I knew better. The way they were acting, it wouldn't end there. Because once you've shown people you'll sacrifice everything for peace, they expect you to keep bleeding. I vented to Lauren more than anyone. She was the only one who didn't try to downplay it. "You're not helping, Mel," she told me bluntly one night over coffee. "You're being used." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Because she was right, and it scared me. Still, I was afraid to stop. Afraid of what would happen if I said no. Would they cut me out? Turn on me? Make me feel like an outsider again? The fear wasn't just about money. It was about belonging. About finally feeling like I was part of something, even if it was at a cost. That's the trap of emotional manipulation. It's never just the task. It's what the task symbolizes. I wasn't decorating a ballroom. I was decorating my worth in their eyes, praying someone would finally notice the effort. And every time they didn't, it hollowed me out a little more. The week before the wedding, I was running on fumes. I hadn't had a proper meal in days. My apartment looked like a warehouse, my skin was breaking out from stress, and my to-do list kept growing. But no one noticed. They just kept sending more things to handle. Jessica's mom needed gluten-free pastries. The hotel wanted final confirmations. My mom wanted to change the font on the dinner menus. Again, I was a machine at that point, moving on autopilot, fueled by adrenaline and quiet resentment. Every little request felt like another paper cut on a wound. And still, no thank yous. No, "This means a lot, Mel." Not even from Ryan. He smiled at me during the rehearsal dinner like everything was fine, like I hadn't just spent $20,000 of my own money making his day perfect. That smile broke something in me. It was the final straw. I cried in the bathroom that night, silent and shaking, trying not to ruin my makeup. I hated that I still wanted their approval, that a thank you could mean so much. But that's what years of emotional starvation will do. You start calling crumbs a feast. I knew I was near my edge. I couldn't keep pushing, pretending this was okay. And yet part of me still believed they'd show up at the last second. That maybe, just maybe, someone would realize how much I'd given. That illusion was the only thing keeping me going. I told myself the wedding day would be the turning point. That they'd stand in that beautifully decorated venue, see the orchids, the lights, the perfection, and finally, see me, the real me. Not the backup, not the helper, the sister, the daughter, the woman who made it all happen. I imagined my mom pulling me aside, eyes filled with pride, whispering, "You really outdid yourself." I pictured Ryan giving a toast, thanking me publicly, finally acknowledging my role. Even Ivy, Maybe she'd give me a real hug and not just a fake smile. It was fantasy, but I needed it. Delusion can be warm, like a soft coat you wrap around the truth to survive it. Mine kept me going through final vendor calls and sleepless nights, through coffee-fueled meetings and spreadsheets covered in red, through silence that hurt louder than words ever could. The morning of the wedding, I walked into that ballroom and froze. It was stunning. The orchids hung like something out of a dream. The setup was flawless. For a second, I almost cried. Not from stress, but from hope. Maybe they'd finally get it. Maybe this was my redemption. But as I stood there, watching everyone else bask in the glow of a day I had built from the ground up, no one looked at me. No one asked how I was. No one saw the sacrifice behind the sparkle. That's when the delusion began to crack, and the truth stepped into the light. As the ceremony unfolded, I moved through the motions like a ghost. Guests complimented the floral designs and gushed about the venue, and I smiled politely. No one knew I was the reason it all ran smoothly. That silence was deafening, worse than an outright insult. My mother took credit for the orchids in front of her friends. I heard her say, "I just knew the white and blush would photograph beautifully." My name didn't come up once. I stood near the bar, invisible, while people toasted her vision. It was like watching my identity dissolve in real time. I spotted Ryan across the room laughing with his groomsmen. No acknowledgement. Not a nod, not a glance. Nothing that said, "You matter." I felt like the event planner, not the sister. Just another vendor on the payroll, except I wasn't getting paid. I was paying. The dinner seating sealed it. I wasn't at the family table. I was tucked away with distant cousins and Ivy's ex-coworkers, people who barely knew my name. That small detail hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just a missed seat. It was a message. You don't belong here. As the lights dimmed and speeches started, I sat in silence, pushing my food around my plate. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to disappear. That night was supposed to be my redemption, but it became the clearest confirmation of where I really stood. I tried to stay composed, but I was unraveling. I slipped away to the bathroom, locked the stall, and let the tears fall. My chest tightened. Not just from hurt, but from the weight of years spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. The music thumped from the ballroom like a taunt. Laughter echoed down the hall, detached from the pain twisting in my gut. No one was looking for me. No one noticed I was gone. That kind of loneliness hits different when you're surrounded by 200 people and still feel like a shadow. Lauren found me eventually. She knocked on the stall gently and whispered, "I'm here." When I opened the door, her face said it all. Concern, compassion, and that slight edge of fury only best friends can carry. "They don't deserve this version of you," she said. The broken one. We sat on the floor, me with smudged mascara and aching feet, her holding my hand like an anchor. "I can't do this anymore," I finally admitted. "They don't see me." And saying it out loud felt like slicing open a vein. Messy, painful, but honest. Lauren didn't tell me to suck it up. She didn't say, "It'll pass." She said, "Then stop." Just that. 2 words I hadn't considered. And in that quiet, carpeted corner of a luxury hotel bathroom, something shifted. Maybe I didn't have to keep sacrificing myself after all. When I returned to the ballroom, I passed a small side office. The door was slightly ajar, and that's when I heard it. My mother's voice. "She'll never even notice." My breath caught. I froze. I leaned closer and heard Ryan reply, "Mom, she's already spent so much. I didn't need to hear more." My blood turned cold. That missing money in my account? It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a banking error. It was them. My family. My mother had taken the final piece of what I had left, and Ryan had let her. I stepped away before they saw me, heart racing like a war drum in my chest. My hands were shaking. This wasn't disappointment anymore. This was betrayal in its rawest form, the kind that rips something out of you and replaces it with rage. I went through the rest of the reception like I was underwater. Applause, speeches, music, it all blurred. I smiled when I needed to, posed for photos. But inside, I was burning. Not just from the theft, but from the certainty that they thought they'd get away with it. That night, after the final guest left, I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop, pulled up my account, and stared at the transaction. $8,400, transferred during the reception. To my mother. It was real. It was done. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I planned. Sunday morning hit like a freight train. I barely slept, and my first instinct was to check that bank transfer again. Still there. $8,400 gone. I screenshotted everything. The timestamp, the recipient, the label. I needed evidence, not just suspicion. And now, I had it. I dug deeper. Phone records, texts, email history. At 9:17 p.m., when the money vanished, I was texting the band. At 9:25, I was answering the venue coordinator about seating. I had digital receipts placing me far from my phone, but the bank app said it was my device. Then it hit me. My PIN. It was Ryan's birthday. Stupid, I know. But it had always felt safe, until now. My mother obviously knew it, and she had access to my clutch during the reception. Everything added up. Not just access, but intent. I called Lauren, my voice shaking. They took it. They really did. She didn't hesitate. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. Now you go get it back. That was the moment I realized I wasn't powerless. I'd been quiet too long, but now I had proof and purpose. That afternoon, I met with Sophia, my law school friend turned family attorney. She listened without judgment, took notes, and then said simply, "This is theft, Meline. Let's treat it as such." I felt something stir in my chest. Not fear, but fire. They had crossed the line. And now, I was drawing one. Sophia helped me draft the letter. It wasn't emotional, it was precise. Clear amounts, dates, documentation, a demand for full repayment, including the unauthorized transfer. Attached was a police report, ready to file. My hands trembled as I reviewed it, but not from doubt, from adrenaline. We printed everything and slid it into a heavy envelope. I stared at it like it might explode, but instead of fear, I felt something different. Relief. This wasn't revenge. It was a reclaiming. Of my money, yes, but more than that. Of my voice. For so long, I'd believed I had to earn respect, that if I worked hard enough, smiled often enough, sacrificed enough, they'd see me. But now I realized they never would. Not unless I forced them to. And maybe not even then. But I'd see myself. And that was enough. That night, I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I sat calmly, reviewing every piece of evidence, like someone preparing for a deposition. I wasn't their puppet anymore. I was the one pulling the strings now. And every shred of doubt I used to carry was replaced with something sharper. Clarity. Before I went to bed, I laid the envelope on my nightstand. One last look. One deep breath. "This ends tomorrow," I whispered. Not in bitterness, but in certainty. I wasn't the girl crying in the hotel bathroom anymore. I was someone new, and they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I pulled into my parents' driveway with my jaw clenched and my heart steady. Their house looked exactly the same. Perfect lawn, expensive decor, nothing out of place. But everything had changed. I had changed. And I wasn't walking in empty-handed this time. I wore my favorite navy blazer, power outfit, hair tied back. No makeup tears today. I stepped inside, envelope tucked neatly in my bag, like a secret weapon. The smell of coffee and pastries floated from the kitchen, masking the tension that was already thick in the air. Everyone was gathered in the sunroom. My mom, holding court like a queen. Ryan and Ivy on the love seat, glowing from their honeymoon. My dad skimming the paper. No one noticed me at first. And when they did, my mom's smile didn't even flicker. "We were just about to start," she said. I sat down, placed my untouched plate on the table, and let the small talk run its course. They laughed about the cake, the weather, the wedding playlist, like everything was fine, like nothing had happened. But under the table, my fingers brushed the edge of that envelope. I was ready. 20 minutes in, I spoke. I noticed something strange when I checked my bank account this morning. The room didn't fall silent, but it changed. Posture stiffened, eyes darted. I watched my mother's confidence shift for just a second. This wasn't going to be a quiet brunch. Not today. The air in the sunroom thickened the second I spoke. My mom tilted her head, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about, Meline?" I looked straight at her and said, "The $8,400 that was transferred from my account last night, during your son's wedding." No one laughed this time. My dad cleared his throat, trying to step into his usual role as the neutral voice. "Let's not overreact," he said. Classic. The same tone he used when I cried at 10 and when I quit the family firm at 25. Calm dismissal masquerading as reason. I didn't flinch. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone and laid them on the table. Transfer, Diana Carter, 9:17 p.m. Ryan's eyes dropped instantly. Ivy looked confused. My mom didn't move. Just sipped her mimosa like I was being dramatic over a dinner bill. That silence? That was my confirmation. No one had my permission. No one had access. Unless they knew my PIN. I paused, giving space for the guilt to settle. And we all know what that number is. My mom didn't blink. It was for the honeymoon upgrades. Someone had to pay. Her tone was ice-cold entitlement. "And it had to be me?" I asked. After I already spent $22,000 of my own money? You didn't even ask. You just took it. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't scared. I was done performing. And I was done letting them write off my hurt as hysteria. My mother's face twisted into something unrecognizable. You're being absurd. Over a small transfer? She snapped. After everything we've done for you? The room went dead quiet. And there it was, the old playbook. Turn the blame, weaponize guilt, rewrite the truth. But I didn't flinch. You didn't do anything for me, I said calmly. You stole from me. That's not family, that's theft. My dad held up a hand trying to broker peace. Let's all take a breath, he offered, eyes flicking to the receipts in front of him. But this wasn't about deep breathing. It was about boundaries. Jessica's parents looked horrified. Ivy looked like she was just now realizing the full story. She paid for all this? She asked Ryan. He looked away, guilt written across his face. I thought most of it was covered by the business, she whispered. My mom tried to cut in. Don't exaggerate, Meline. I pulled out the folder and slid it across the table. In it were every invoice, every receipt, every email thread. This is what I paid for, not with family funds, with my savings. My dad finally leaned in, scanning the documents. His expression shifted, line by line. This wasn't drama. It was documentation. This isn't just about money, I said, voice steady. It's about being seen. It's about not being treated like I'm disposable. And it stops today. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but this time I was faster. You already made your choice when you took that money. Now I'm making mine. I reached into my bag and placed the envelope on the table. It landed with a soft thud, but the impact was seismic. That's a formal demand for repayment, I said, prepared by my lawyer. You have 48 hours to return the full amount, or I'll file the police report attached inside. My mom's face went pale. You wouldn't dare, she said, eyes narrowing. Think of the family, the reputation, your brother's career. Her panic wasn't about me, it was about optics. That's what hurt the most. Not the money, not the theft. The fact that her only concern was being embarrassed. I didn't respond with rage. I didn't yell. I stood up. You should have thought of that before stealing from me. Jessica's father stood as well. Diana, this is serious, he said firmly. We had no idea she was footing the bill. My mom's silence spoke louder than any defense could have. Ryan finally found his voice. Did you really use her phone? He asked our mother. She glared at him. It was just sitting there. She wasn't going to use it. I did what was necessary. The room fell silent again, this time with the weight of her admission. There it was, the truth. You're not untouchable, I said quietly. Not anymore. I turned toward the door, the folder still sitting untouched in front of my father. I didn't need a dramatic exit. I just needed to leave on my own terms. And this time, I wasn't walking away with my head down. As I reached the foyer, I heard my mother behind me. How dare you air our family business in front of strangers? Her voice was sharp, furious, but it didn't shake me. I turned slowly and looked her in the eye. You made it public when you stole from me. I'm just responding. My father followed, face heavy with a seriousness I rarely saw. Diana, this is bigger than a misunderstanding, he said, holding the folder. His voice was even, but there was something in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or realization. We're looking at possible charges here. Jessica and her parents hovered awkwardly near the staircase. Ivy stood beside Ryan, arms folded, no longer looking enchanted with the Carter family. You lied, she said to my mom. You said Meline volunteered, that it was her choice. My mom's jaw clenched. Her mask was cracking. She opened her mouth to spin it again, but this time no one was buying it. I did what was necessary, she repeated. But even she didn't seem convinced anymore. Her grip on control was slipping fast. The silence of the room was no longer reverent, it was judgmental. And that's when I knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. Everyone could see it. The theft, the manipulation, the years of imbalance. It had all surfaced. And for once, my mother was the one standing alone, backed into the corner she'd built herself. I may have overstepped, my mother said finally, voice quieter now. But I did it for the family. That line had always worked before. It wrapped selfishness in silk and called it sacrifice. But this time, no one applauded. No one nodded. The room just waited. For the family? I echoed. I am family. Or does that only count when I'm useful to you? My voice didn't shake. I was done crying, done begging for recognition. This wasn't an emotional plea. It was a declaration, and I wasn't asking for permission anymore. My father cleared his throat again, looking at me. Then the envelope. We'll return everything. Every cent. he said, like he was announcing a business decision. With interest. It wasn't kindness. It was damage control. But for once, he was choosing accountability over avoidance. Then came the kicker. My mother sighed and said, "You always took things too personally, Meline. This could have been handled quietly." My stomach dropped. That was her version of an apology, blaming me for making her consequences public. The manipulation was still there, just better disguised. I took a breath and met her gaze. If you ever want a relationship with me again, you'll have to start by owning what you did. Fully. No excuses. She didn't respond, and that silence was louder than anything she could have said. Sometimes the absence of remorse is the clearest answer. Ryan stepped forward slowly, hands in his pockets. "I should have said something sooner," he admitted. "I knew how much you were helping, but I didn't realize how far it had gone. I'm sorry, Mel." For once, he sounded like a brother. Not the favorite, not the puppet. Jessica placed a hand on his back. "We want to make this right," she said. Her voice was firm. "Not just financially, but with how we treat you." I nodded, cautiously. The words meant something, but actions would mean more. Still, it was the first time I felt seen by either of them. Behind them, my parents stood frozen, my dad's pride dented, my mom's image shattered. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking to keep the peace. I had brought receipts, boundaries, consequences, and that power shift was undeniable. Even they could feel it. I turned toward the door again, envelope no longer necessary. My message had been delivered, loud and clear. "I'll expect the transfer by tonight," I said calmly. "And if it's not there, the police report gets filed tomorrow." That wasn't a threat. It was a promise I intended to keep. As I stepped outside into the crisp fall air, something inside me felt lighter, not because they'd suddenly changed, but because I had. I stood up for myself. I refused to be silenced. And whether they liked it or not, the dynamic in our family would never be the same again. That evening, the transfer hit my account, $22,786, plus the $8,400 they took. I stared at the screen for a while, not relieved exactly, more like stunned. The money was back, but it felt different now, like something had snapped and couldn't be glued together again. I had dreamed of this moment for months. My savings restored, justice served, but it didn't come with celebration. Just a kind of quiet grief. Because getting the money back didn't erase what they did. It didn't rewrite the years of being overlooked or used. That transfer was their peace offering, their way of tying a bow on the damage. But I wasn't interested in closure wrapped in convenience. I wanted something deeper: respect, healing, recognition, the kind that couldn't be deposited into a bank account. Still, seeing my balance whole again was a reminder of what I had fought for, of how hard I worked to earn that money, and how much harder I had to work to get it back. It wasn't just currency, it was dignity, boundaries, self-worth, and now, it was mine again. I took one final screenshot, not to send, just to keep, proof that I hadn't imagined it, proof that I had every right to protect myself, and the power to do it. The money was just the beginning. The real work was about reclaiming who I was outside their control. The next few days were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive email from my mother. The kind of silence that feels intentional, like they didn't know how to handle being held accountable. Or maybe they were hoping I'd just disappear again. My dad eventually sent a brief email. "Funds have been returned. Hope we can all move forward." It read like a memo, not a message. There was no warmth, no real apology, just a business-like conclusion to a problem they still didn't truly understand. Ryan texted a few times. Apologies, regret, promises to do better. I responded politely, but kept my distance. I needed space, not guilt-ridden check-ins. Jessica, to her credit, reached out once. No excuses, just a genuine, "I'm sorry for how this unfolded. You deserved better." I wasn't ready to engage with any of them deeply. I'd spent too long being the peacemaker, the fixer. Now, I needed to protect my peace. Not by cutting them off, but by choosing when and how I let them in. That choice was new and powerful. In that quiet, I found clarity. I wasn't obligated to return to dysfunction just because it wore the mask of family. Their silence wasn't rejection, it was confirmation that I'd changed. And if they wanted me in their lives again, it would have to be on different terms. Therapy wasn't something I used to talk about. Growing up, emotional help was seen as weakness, or worse, drama. But after everything, I knew I needed it. So I booked my first session with Dr. Bennett, a therapist Lauren had recommended, and walked in with a knot in my chest. She listened, took notes, and then said one sentence that stuck with me. "You were conditioned to believe love had to be earned." I sat with that for a long moment. Because yeah, that hit. Every sacrifice I made, every boundary I let slide, had been in pursuit of approval. With her help, I started unpacking the patterns, the golden child dynamic, the scapegoating, the chronic people-pleasing masked as family loyalty. I realized that my family's dysfunction wasn't my fault, but healing from it was my responsibility. That was a hard but freeing truth. Some sessions left me drained. Others made me feel like I could breathe again for the first time in years. But slowly, I started to rewrite my own narrative. Not the version they fed me, dutiful daughter, helper, background character, but the real one, survivor, builder, worthy. I started to feel more like myself, only stronger, wiser. I wasn't just reclaiming my money, I was reclaiming my voice. And for the first time in my life, I was telling my story for me, not to win anyone's love, but because it deserved to be heard. Boundaries became my new currency. I didn't shout them, I just lived them. I stopped explaining my decisions, stopped justifying every no, and started asking myself, does this cost me my peace? If the answer was yes, I walked away. No guilt, no second guessing. My mom tried to call once. I let it go to voicemail. Her message danced around accountability, more about how the family was still healing than any actual apology. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Healing isn't a group project when only one person's doing the work. Ryan invited me to dinner with him and Jessica. I agreed, with conditions. No talks about the wedding, no last-minute favors, just dinner, as siblings. To my surprise, they respected it. That dinner was awkward, but honest. And for once, I didn't leave feeling smaller than I walked in. I wasn't cutting people off. I was cutting off patterns. Patterns that made me shrink, that made me question my worth. Every no I gave wasn't rebellion. It was repair. I had spent so long trying to be loved by people who didn't know how to love without control. Now I was rebuilding something better. Not just with them, but within myself. A version of me that didn't flinch when I took up space. A version that said, I matter, without needing anyone to echo it back. And that version? She was just getting started. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time, I didn't go to my parents' house. Instead, I spent it with Lauren's family in New Hampshire. Loud, chaotic, and messy in the best way. Her mom hugged me like I belonged there. Her brothers argued over football. No one asked me to prove my worth. I helped make cranberry sauce, laughed at bad jokes, and even took a nap on the couch without guilt. No one expected me to perform, to entertain, to fix anything. I was just there. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. At one point, I looked around the table and felt this unexpected warmth in my chest. It wasn't blood ties. It was choice. People choosing to show up, choosing to care, choosing to include me just because they wanted to. That's when I realized family isn't biology. It's behavior. My own family hadn't been erased, but they weren't the center of my identity anymore. I didn't crave their validation. I didn't wait for them to get it right. I was building a life with people who already saw me, and with people, like myself, who were still learning how. That shift didn't happen all at once, but it was real. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I was the architect, and I was creating a foundation that didn't require me to disappear just to belong. With my savings restored and my confidence rebuilt, I finally put a deposit down on a small condo in Cambridge. My place, no curated decor from my mother, no secondhand furniture of guilt, just walls I could paint, shelves I could fill, and space that was fully mine. I launched my boutique events business 3 months later. Extraordinary moments on realistic budgets. A quiet rebellion against the kind of excess that nearly broke me. My first few clients found me through word of mouth, and this time, they saw me as a professional, not a placeholder. I worked with couples who valued meaning over spectacle. I curated events for people who wanted connection, not just perfection. Each job reminded me why I started this in the first place. Not for approval, not for applause, but because I was damn good at it. My parents reached out occasionally. Emails, short calls, nothing deep, but I didn't need depth from them anymore. I had stopped looking for something they were never taught to give. And while I still held space for the idea of reconciliation, I no longer built my life around waiting for it. Because the real win wasn't the money. It wasn't even the justice. It was the freedom. Freedom to live on my terms. Freedom to be seen without shrinking. Freedom to choose love that didn't come with conditions. And in that freedom, I finally found peace. For years, I thought what they took from me was just time and money. But it went deeper. They took confidence I hadn't yet built, dreams I hadn't dared to speak, and the belief that love should never be conditional. And the worst part? I let them. For too long. They didn't just take, they trained me to give, to bend, to tolerate things that felt wrong in the name of family unity. That conditioning ran so deep, I couldn't see where their voices ended and mine began. It wasn't just a theft, it was an erosion. But here's the beautiful part. I got it all back. Not in one day, not with one confrontation, but step by step. Boundaries, therapy, real friendships. They gave me back the parts I had forgotten were mine. I started seeing myself outside their lens, and I liked what I saw. I stopped defining myself by what I could do for others, and started asking who I could be for myself. The woman I became wasn't bitter. She was better. Not harder, but wiser. Not colder, but clearer. Because pain, when processed, becomes purpose. What they took may have cracked me, but what I reclaimed rebuilt me. Stronger, more grounded. And this time, no one else gets to hold the blueprint for my worth. That's mine now, and I'm guarding it with the kind of love I once gave away too easily. Looking back, I see now that this wasn't just about my story. It was about generational patterns, cycles of guilt, control, silence. My parents didn't invent those dynamics. They inherited them and passed them down, probably without even realizing the damage being done. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it explains why accountability felt like betrayal to them. In their world, respect meant obedience. Boundaries meant distance. And vulnerability, that was weakness. So when I spoke up, it felt like I was burning the house down. But I wasn't destroying the family. I was renovating it, tearing out rot so new growth could happen. Maybe not with them, maybe not now, but with the people I'd one day love, raise, support. I was clearing space for something better, something honest. Every time I said, "That's not okay," I was breaking a pattern. Every time I chose therapy over silence, self-respect over appeasement, I was rewriting the script. It was hard, lonely, sometimes even heartbreaking, but it was worth it. Healing always is. I don't need to repeat what I endured to feel connected to them. I don't need to keep carrying their story in place of my own. I've made peace with the fact that change doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with resistance. But I'll take resistance over regret. Saying no used to terrify me. I thought it meant I was selfish, ungrateful, difficult. I'd been taught that my value lived in compliance, in how easy I made everyone else's life. So I said yes, even when it hurt, even when I had nothing left to give. But no isn't rejection. It's direction. It's choosing where your energy goes, what your heart allows, and how your time is spent. The first few were shaky, soft, apologetic. But now, I say no with clarity. With compassion, sure, but without the guilt that used to follow me. I've said no to family gatherings that felt more like performances than reunions. No to clients who treated me like an assistant, not a professional. No to the version of myself who thought exhaustion was proof of loyalty. Every no made room for a bigger, better yes. Yes to peace, to growth, to self-respect, to friendships that pour into me instead of draining me. Yes to rest, without apology, to joy, without shame. That shift didn't happen because someone gave me permission. It happened when I gave it to myself. Saying no wasn't a loss, it was liberation. It taught me that love isn't measured by how much I tolerate, but how well I honor myself. And now, my yes is sacred, is because it comes from a place of truth, not fear. And that truth is what finally set me free. There was a time when putting myself first felt like betrayal. I'd been taught that love meant sacrifice, that prioritizing my needs was selfish. But I've learned that choosing yourself isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And anyone who sees your self-respect as a threat probably benefited from your silence. I used to twist myself into versions that made other people comfortable, softer, smaller, easier. I thought that's what connection required. But true connection doesn't demand that you disappear. It invites your whole self to show up and honors the space you take up. My mother used to say I was too much, too sensitive, too opinionated, too intense. Now I wear all of that with pride. I am intense. I care deeply. I notice things. That's not a flaw. It's my compass. The very traits they tried to quiet are the ones guiding me now. Choosing myself meant disappointing people who had gotten used to me putting them first. It meant uncomfortable conversations, hard boundaries, quiet exits. But it also meant peace. Real, deep, lasting peace. The kind that comes when your inside voice finally matches your outside life. And here's what I know now. I'm not hard to love. I'm just hard to manipulate. And that distinction, that saved me. It reminded me that choosing myself was never about pushing people away. It was about finally coming home to me. Healing didn't make me bitter. It made me brave. I used to live with an open wound. Reactive, raw, always waiting for the next cut. Now I live with an open heart. Not naive, not guarded, just aware, grounded, capable of loving without losing myself in the process. There's power in staying soft after being hurt, in choosing empathy when anger feels easier. But softness without boundaries is self-abandonment. So I've learned to be both, strong and tender, kind and clear. I don't need to harden to survive. I just need to stay awake. I've let go of the need to be understood by people who aren't willing to understand themselves. That alone has changed my world. I no longer chase closure. I no longer over-explain. I let people sit with their choices while I walk forward in mine. Forgiveness didn't come as a grand moment. It came quietly, in mornings when I didn't wake up angry, in conversations where I didn't flinch, in memories that stopped controlling the present. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about them. It's about freedom for me. I'm no longer living to avoid pain. I'm living to experience truth. That means joy, discomfort, growth, and grace. And through it all, my heart remains open, not to be hurt again, but to feel fully. Because I didn't come this far just to be numb. I came to live. People think a happy ending means everything's fixed, but healing doesn't always tie itself up with a bow. My family didn't become perfect. We still have work to do, but the happy ending isn't about them. It's about me, finally choosing to write a story that feels real. I bought my condo. I built my business. I host dinners with people who see me, not as a role, but as a person. I still get texts from Ryan. We're slowly rebuilding. My mom called last week. It wasn't deep, but it wasn't cold either. It's progress. And progress matters. I've started celebrating small wins, Sunday walks, client praise, laughing without overthinking it. I didn't need fireworks to mark the shift. I just needed peace. That's what healing gave me. Not perfection, not applause. Just space to breathe and be me. There's freedom in knowing you don't have to prove your worth anymore. That you're allowed to outgrow roles that no longer serve you. That love doesn't require sacrifice of your soul. That joy isn't something to earn. It's something to embrace. So yeah, this is my happy ending. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm finally free. Free to choose, to heal, to thrive. And if you've ever doubted your right to that kind of ending, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to choose you. And it's never too late. If you've made it this far, maybe something in this story echoed inside you. Maybe you felt overlooked in your own family. Maybe you've poured yourself into people who never said thank you. Or maybe, like me, you've finally decided that your peace is non-negotiable. Whatever it is, just know you're not alone. There's power in your voice, even when it shakes. Especially when it shakes. And if this story touched something real in you, take a second to hit that like button. Not just for me, but for everyone out there choosing healing over silence. Hit subscribe too, if you want more stories like this. Stories that don't shy away from pain, but walk straight through it towards something stronger. Feel free to share your own story in the comments. I read every one, and trust me, what you say matters. Your voice matters. And if you want to help keep stories like this alive and the channel going strong, you can support us with a super thanks. Just click the heart with the $ right under the video. Every little bit helps us keep creating with heart. Your journey, your boundaries, your growth, they're all valid. And if no one's told you today, you're doing better than you think. Keep going. Keep choosing you. Because sometimes the real revolution isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and personal. And it changes everything. Thank you for being here. Really, it means more than you know.